And at 10, moisture sensitive. One of the things that I find to be the absolute dumbest thing about not only these damned suits, but also the FNAF series in general, is how stupid it is that the Springlock mechanisms inside the Springlock suits fail with moisture. Sure, it explains why William gets spring-locked because the room was dripping and whatever, the ceiling was leaking, and it makes everyone confused with Crying Child because he was crying. Despite that not being a Springlock failure, everyone thought it was because he was crying and, you know, moisture. But in actual practice, that is a horribly flawed mechanic. Like, if me breathing and sweating is going to make the metal bits snap on me, why would I do it in a hot robotic suit? That seems like a horrible and stupid idea. Like, yes, okay, put me in a hot and sweaty environment that gets me killed if it gets wet. That's not a liability at all. I get sweaty wearing my freaking Doctor Strange costume, okay? Imagine a giant suit full of metal, okay? That would also be heavy as hell to walk around in too, only making the sweating worse. In at 9, designer. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions. By William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that's not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby and her comrades, we know that they were made in order to kill, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to assume that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. But honestly, if William made the Funtimes with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks, you get me? And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal, bars, cogs, gears, and chains and more into the same space as your body would be made with pure intentions, you should stop watching these videos and go to a therapist. Seriously. I have a number. In at 8, no bonus. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside is nuts. And while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers or miles, whatever, per hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't necessarily complain about it. And while yes, they have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit. That's an incredible feat of technology, and I'm sure they play into it with the marketing. Like, I mean, we hear the phone guy tapes from FNAF 3 talking about these things, okay? And he never mentions a bonus or anything like that for you risking your life with one of these damn suits. And even if you end up getting Springlocked, there doesn't really seem to be any compensation package for your loved ones. Hell, if you die, you may not even get your severance. Actually, maybe that's why they do it. Your family can file a lawsuit since, you know, you died on the job, but that's a lengthy court battle against a massive company with a serial killer who has yet to be caught at the front lines. It's not really gonna do much good for your fam. So the fact that you don't get a bonus if you get in one of these suits, let alone get spring-locked, no thanks. It's a red flag. Swipe left. And it's 7, required. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they didn't really need to create. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, okay? Just make a separate suit for the animatronic characters, for the employees, okay? Like, the people who run your business. You know, they are the ones who make you the money, so, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs. OSHA would have been all over these goddamn suits if it was real in this universe, but apparently I guess it's not. And honestly, it's probably required by your contract to wear these suits at work. And if you refuse, you're probably gonna get fired, especially considering how they started getting ready to fire Jeremy because he saw Glitch Trap in Help Wanted. So why wouldn't they fire you for not wearing your suit if it's in your contract? Even if you claim it was to protect your life, they'd find another reason that you couldn't really fight against, so. Especially, you know, when a serial killer is the CEO. And at 6, implications. Now, while the term Springlock is used in real life, it's totally different from the actual FNAF mechanism. I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from Springlocks and You, How Not to Die Remastered. It's a thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs, okay? From my research, what I gathered is that a Springlock in real life is, in simplest terms, a spring lock. It's like if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks or just ends up bringing you back or quotes this page. So it's kind of circular logic, okay? You can't use evidence within the thing that you're trying to prove as proof that it is real. It's like plugging a power bar into itself. It doesn't work. You can't use the same article to prove that Springlocks are real, okay? Because they're not. At least their game form isn't. But if the Springlock failure was real, I think the implications of like all of this being real in general is like one of the worst things. You get it? Like it's definitely in the top 10. Get it? It's a little meta content joke for you because this is a top 10 list. It's in the top 10. Halfway through, into number 5, liability. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way with enough room for a human to fit inside is insane, and while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers an hour in huge giant metal death boxes, so maybe we can't really complain. While yes, they do have their faults, there's nothing compared to the ability to be both an animatronic and human suit. It's an incredible feat of technology, even if just absolutely the dumbest idea ever. Because it's terrifying for the same reasons that it would be in game. Someone can dress in it and pretend to be a robot, okay? It can clamp down on you at any second, and it has done so multiple times before. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they did not need to end up creating, but like, I don't know, like these things are so hella deadly. Why would both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them? Especially Henry, like goddamn. Just make a separate suit for the animatronic, okay? Like make a separate suit that your employee can wear. It's the employees, the people who run your business. They make you money, so that, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic bits replacing their, you know, normal human organic bits in a hot suit that fails when it gets moist. You know, sweat, breathing. Yeah, I would never get in one of those things. Even if there hadn't been an incident before, okay, that just seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen. And I don't want to be the one whose family sues because I'm too dead to do it myself, alright? So, no. It's a myth that they shouldn't have gotten sued. In it for crying child. Okay, now this one's certainly gonna make people mad, but there's no way that I could do this list without mentioning the greatest debate of literally anyone yelling at me ever. The amount of people who have messaged me on Instagram or on TikTok yelling at me in my TikTok comments or in the YouTube comments telling me that the bite of 83 is somehow a Springlock incident bothers me to my core. I say this every time I bring it up. It's not a Springlock failure, okay? The fact that a load of people consider this to be a Springlock failure is the myth that I'm addressing. The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, okay? There's no Springlocks that could have a chance of failing, since, you know, a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanisms failing to hold the robotic bits away, meaning that it snaps back into animatronic mode when a person's inside. That's why it's bad if there's a person inside, and there would be no Springlock mechanisms inside the mouth either, because that would always be in animatronic mode. Like your head, your eyes would line up with the opening of the mouth so that, you know, you could see. So yeah, that's kind of. Plus, I don't think anyone who is 7 feet tall working at Freddy Fazbear's. No, they're in the NBA. The jaw also just moves up and down, okay? Truthfully, I don't know how much of the community believes this to be a Springlock incident, because the comments are always going to be filled with more people that are against it than for it, because if you're for it, you don't really feel the need to comment about it. But it's still concerning the amount of comments I'm seeing and the amount of DMs I get on Instagram, okay? Which, by the way, follow me on if you don't hate me, because I need to get past 20. I get to 19 and it goes back down. I have to get past the 120, you know? Getting close to the end of number 3, not beefed up. The fact that these animatronics are incredibly powerful is absolutely an insane thing that nobody really seems to grasp. Like the fact that Fredbear was able to crush a child's skull, something that we've covered how crazy is. Imagine if that was an employee, okay? Like ignoring the fact that you think it's a Springlock incident or that it's a Springlock suit, the amount of power that jaw has is a hazard for everyone who comes into contact with it. Like goddamn. And before you say anything, okay, it wasn't a Springlock failure. I don't know how many times I need to go over that. There's no Springlocks in the mouth, and they weren't active at the time, okay? It can't be a Springlock failure. So these animatronics are just insanely powerful animatronics, alright? Which would be explained by them being intended to kill, which also explains why it would have the power to crush crying child's skull. The way I see it, William probably wanted to use the Fredbear suit as his kill suit because, you know, Freddy's the more popular character, but then he had to change to Bonnie after, you know, his son was killed in the suit, especially considering how he saw Elizabeth end up possessing Baby, so he was probably worried that Crying Child did the same with Fredbear, so yeah, that's the way I see it. But ultimately, in number 2, Springlocks are real. Okay, you see, if I was to actually do like a cosplay of the purple guy and actually do it without it being a joke, I'd probably end up using a purple phone case, because, you know, you gotta reference the phone guy. But I don't need a Springlock crank, because those aren't actually a thing in real life. While the term Springlock is used in real life, it is a totally different mechanism from the actual FNAF thing, okay? I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from the Springlocks and You How Not to Die remastered thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs. From my research, what I gathered was that a Springlock in real life is in the simplest of terms if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real Springlocks just simply brings you back to that page or quotes that page, so there's really only one source. Springlocks, as they're used in the games, do not exist in real life. Alright, that is a myth. The term is used, but it's two separate words instead of one, and they mean totally different things. So please stop. And finally, in at number 1, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only being revealed in the survival logbook of all things, and then confirmed in the FNAF movie scripts that Scott ended up tossing after he talked about them on Reddit. And honestly, we don't really know much about her. We don't know how she died, but there are plenty of theories that claim to have evidence of her being a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way, I don't know. Maybe she ends up possessing Golden Freddy after all, I don't know, okay? We figured that he could be a Springlock suit and then that he had like the guts removed or something like that, hence the slumped over nature as I talked about earlier, but if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, wouldn't they have found it when they were gutting it? Because like, that seems like something you'd notice. I don't know, but maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. But for a suit technician, he also did, you know, get into the animatronic when it was wet, something that he was definitely smart enough to avoid. But yeah, Cassidy being a Springlock victim has very little evidence, if you can even call it evidence though, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna deem this one a myth. Light your torches, get your pitchforks, come at me in the comments section for saying that, because I know you're going to. I can't avoid it every time, but you're not going to change the outcome of this video, alright? It's already uploaded, you can't change it. It's too late. In at 10, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow Animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and while they are from the main FNAF universe, this is a fan theory, so it counts. This comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guy dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole, and instead of the individual Springlock mechanisms that are present within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the Shadow Animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions, and while there are holes in this theory, this is, like, potentially the case. It's an idea at the very least. So yeah, Shadow Animatronics are fan Springlock victims because it's not confirmed. That's how I made it work. In at 9, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists in Final Night's 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on night 5 and is found by the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal Golden Fredbear, only with his suit glowing a deep purple color, while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place, and the inside of the mask, though it appears like there is nothing inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during the jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. I was going to make that a joke, but I actually wrote that into the script, holy crap. This animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow Animatronics are Springlock victims, which was confirmed to be false by Scott when he stated that William was a Springlock failure, but still, okay? On the museum level of Final Nights, which unlocks after night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear. In at 8, Fred Trap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it, and there actually are Fredbear versions of Springtrap, which is kinda cool, but I mean, kind of expected. Fred Trap is exactly what you would expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made and honestly are scarier than normal Springtrap for me. I mean, I don't know, I guess for some reason I think bears are scarier than rabbits. Don't know why I would think that. But I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott himself was of it, but that could also just be idle speculation. There's another theory that I have that maybe he was going to use the Fredbear animatronic, but then after his son got killed by it, he switched to Bonnie. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fred Trap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of his dead kid. Yeah, so Fredbear is definitely one of the more strangely unique versions that I've seen for this list, and you know what? I'm pretty damn impressed. These designs are pretty good. In at 7, Shadow Spring Bonnie. Shadow Spring Bonnie is one of the 2 primary antagonists of Final Nights 2. He is one of the final animatronics in the game. Shadow Spring Bonnie resembles Springtrap, as to be expected when mentioning Springlock suits, but similar to Springtrap, he lacks the suit on his feet and has a majority of his right ear missing. Overall, he has rips, but not any real missing limbs or parts at all, which is a stark contrast to the burnt animatronics in the first 4 nights of this game. His face glows white, which is noticeable when he's in the hallway, but also gives him a more sinister appearance and pushes the something supernatural that most of the Shadow animatronics have, like with Shadow Bonnie from FNAF AR. Shadow Spring Bonnie takes the role of Burnt Freddy and Burnt Foxy on night 5, which means that he's very fast, so the player needs to seal the vent quickly, otherwise you'll get jump scared. He also may appear in the hallway, but if he does, never use your flashlight, otherwise you'll get insta-killed. Instead, you need to inspect his face when he appears there, and if he's twitching, close the door. A rattling sound will be heard so that you know he's left. And the fact that you need to look at his face to see if you're in danger just makes this even scarier, especially considering the fact that most of what you need to do relies on fast reflexes, and then you're just sitting there trying to figure out if he's really twitching or if that's just you going crazy. Not from personal experience, I don't know. What? In at 6, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, now he is a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has bugs coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets, he's missing the exosuit on his right foot, and his character is holding a flesh-colored, at least colored, it's probably flesh-made, let's be honest, phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or like blood tendril strands connecting to the side of his head, okay? It's horrifying. It's a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 years old when he got spring-locked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Yikes. This kid could have been the next best Fortnite player. Halfway through into number 5, comments. I've mentioned this in previous videos, mostly to explain why there won't ever be an actual real FNAF restaurant that you'll be able to walk into, and it still remains true since we're only getting a virtual diner that you can only order online. However, I think that one of the worst things still, and especially when it comes to these suits, is the goddamn comments about them. You wanna know a comment that I saw yesterday? Well, yesterday for me as I was writing this, Wednesday for you. Okay, I saw someone say that they want to be spring-locked. What? Why? Why would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how messed up that is? You're saying that you want to be killed by this thing? Because there's some hotlines that you should call. Like, why on sweet heaven's earth would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how absolutely agonizingly painful that would be? That would be one of the worst things imaginable, okay? Holy sweet Lord baby Jesus W. Christ. That would be one of the worst ways to go, if not the worst way. At least like as far as like actually could happen goes, I think at least, okay? Because like a volcano would suck, but it's a bit unrealistic. It's a bad idea, okay? Stop doing this, stop saying this. Okay, talk to a doctor. And at 4, Afton. I talked about how the implications would apply to like how everything in FNAF would have happened in real life if one of these was real, but one of the worst implications would be that Afton was real. This man has caused me enough pain and suffering already. I don't need him to be like an actual person, especially considering how Springtrap would be set loose next year. And then everything after it would happen. This channel would probably be a true crime channel and not a gaming channel. I'd probably have tried proving it myself and maybe even become a PI so that I can do so. But straight up, this man has already caused me enough grief and suffering and loss and tears of pain at night in my life, and it's made me lose enough of it already to him. So yeah, him being real would just be the worst thing that I can imagine for me. However, that's only if the Springlock failure thing was also real. There are worse things for people in the FNAF universe though, not in real life, such as in at 3, paperwork. One of the worst things for the survivors after a Springlock failure has to be the paperwork that is associated with it, because goddamn, someone dying in your building is one thing. Someone dying in your building because of something in your building is another, and then add on to that the fact that they were your employee and probably forced into that suit without, like, because of their contract, and you'll be filing reports until you have to retire. Okay, especially because one mistake on those papers means like even more paperwork, and I don't really know anyone who likes to do paperwork. Personally, I hate it, but that's also because my ADHD makes me like, it makes it unbearable for me, honestly. Like, it's even tough to write scripts sometimes, but I mean, eventually I have to, but like that's where my brain thrives, you know, in that stressful environment, which is not good for my health. But if it was that kind of paperwork, I would honestly just quit, because there was no way in hell that I would even want to attempt to keep my focus on that when I can just scroll through TikTok or YouTube instead. So yeah, no thanks. But ultimately, in at number 2, replaced. Oh yeah, don't forget your bones being replaced with metal ones. Yeah, like sure, there's surgery for people who need repairs or replacements, okay? I think like hip replacements are probably the most common actually. However, those have whole processes behind them to ensure a fast recovery and, you know, survival, not being infected. All of a sudden being shoved full of metal bones where normal ones used to be, that's a guaranteed infection at the very least, especially considering how, you know, your normal bones have to go somewhere else. And whether they're just crushed and then spread out inside you or just pushed out the other side, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Plus, you know, probably not alive, which I guess is a good thing, since you won't really have to deal with the intense pain for too long, hopefully. But this actually makes me think, if you replace all of your bones with metal ones, are you still you? Is this like a Ship of Theseus moment? Am I about to have like a WandaVision finale? Or like, are we just our brain? And if we are our brain, does that mean that if we have a brain transplant, do we become another person despite it still being my body? And does that mean that we're just like a brain piloting a bone mech with meat armor? Oh no, existential crisis! And finally, in at number 1, death. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? But the worst thing about a Springlock failure has to be the whole death part, right? Ignore my mumbling. I mean, honestly, okay, it's obviously not for some of you, given the whole comments thing earlier, but the only reason you wouldn't die in a Springlock suit is because you're a main character and need to be around for the story. And then you're just in agonizing pain for the rest of your life. Yeah, the only people who have survived a Springlock failure, well, confirmed, is William. So, yeah, and you know, he's like the main antagonist of the game and was only able to survive since the spirit of a victim was keeping him alive. And in the books, William also ended up getting springlocked before, but then got out of the suit, since Dave Miller, who is revealed to be William, has scars from a previous Springlock failure from before he becomes Springtrap in the books. So the only one who can ever really survive seems to be William, and he's survived it twice. Anyone else is boned, and personally, I'd rather not die by having millions of small metal bits and several dozen large ones shoved into my body, trying to replace my body. I would rather die peacefully in my sleep with Chica's hand around my throat.
Number 10, William Afton and the leak. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to Springlock failures is William Afton. William Afton from the games, that is. In this version of the story, William Afton basically got destroyed by these Springlocks. He was fully impaled by the Springlocks in the Springlock Bonnie suit after trying to escape the ghosts of his victims. He thought hiding inside the Spring Bonnie suit would protect him, but hey, he was wrong. It turned out that there was water on the floor which, when he touched, caused the Springlocks in the suit to loosen, or, you know, water that possibly dripped down from him, and also his breath. This caused the Springlocks to malfunction, they fully released, and impaled William, ultimately causing his death. However, this is William Afton, so even dying would not keep him dead forever. It'd only keep him dead for a little while. We later learned that one of the vengeful spirits, or possibly a pair of them, cursed William to experience the pain that they they had felt, thereby extending his life indefinitely, no matter the pain he suffered. Which is how William Afton can be a shambling corpse, but also somehow still alive. And friends, before I move on to this next spot on the list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, and if you love FNAF 2, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9, Bite of 87. Well, we don't really know for sure if this is correct, as the Bite of 87 is still not fully confirmed in terms of all the details. It is possible that it was the result of a Springlock failure. It's believed that the Bite of 87 led to the fatal injury of a guest when the frontal lobe of their brain was badly damaged in an incident related to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Now, based on the Bite of 83, we can imagine it may have been a similar incident where someone basically stuck their head inside an animatronic and kinda had it chomped. Or it could have been something else that happened. But either way, if it was similar to the Bite of 83, or even if it wasn't, it seems likely that a Springlock failure could be possible, as the suits may have still been in use at that time, as the suits may still have been in use at the time that this terrible incident occurred. Now, some might say they stopped being used after the Bite of 83, but with a timeline this wonky, I don't think we have anything that is 100% concrete conclusive yet in regards to when Springlock suits stopped being used across the board forever. Also, I feel like there are times maybe where they were like, let's stop using them for like a bit, and then we think we fixed them, and then they're still, dysfunctional. Because that's just how Springlock suits are. I would never even go near one of those things. Death trap. Number 8. Can you Springlock a ghost? To answer this question, we could turn to the Fazbear Frights book 135 AM, and one of the stories within its pages, titled The New Kid. In this story, a young boy named Devin befriends the new kid at school, Kelsey. However, while his other friend Mick seems to really like Kelsey, and at first, Devin does too, eventually Devin becomes jealous of Kelsey. When Kelsey seemingly ditches them one day when they're all hanging out, Devin decides to get revenge on him for doing this. Finding a new hangout spot, a now abandoned former Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, Devin dares Kelsey to put on a Springlock suit. Kelsey does this and begins dancing around, but doing so, of course, triggers the Springlocks within the suit to release, seemingly impaling him. While initially Devin and Mick leave Kelsey there for dead, Devin eventually returns to investigate, with Mick wondering if Kelsey might still be alive. When Devin does return, he doesn't see Kelsey in the suit, but later spots a black-haired ghostly figure within. It is implied that Kelsey is some kind of spirit of vengeance, possibly one of the spirits from the game lore that possessed Golden Freddy. And if you're wondering how we know that, well, later in the book we see that Kelsey is alive and well, seemingly, after he seemed to have been Springlocked, so either he has superpowers or he a ghost. Number 7. The Amazing Escape. William Afton in the books is much more lucky, or perhaps just more brilliant, than his video game counterpart, at least when it comes to dodging Springlocks somehow. Like in the games, he ends up getting Springlocked, but instead of being killed by this experience, he miraculously survives, seeming to somehow pull a Harry Houdini and just escape that. While Charlie activates the Springlocks in the suit he's wearing at the end of the novel Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes, we learn in the next book, The Twisted Ones, that the blood found at the scene ends up being analyzed in a lab and found to be fake blood. Finally, in the fourth closet, it is confirmed that William Afton, while harmed, miraculously survived being Springlocked. I don't know how this is possible, but it's a thing that happened. Pretty impressive considering in most other cases, it's pretty much a death sentence. Number 6. Triggered by wriggling off mini arenas. This is probably my favorite consequence when it comes to the Springlocks malfunctioning. Likely because you yourself actually get to experience failure in a way. But obviously not in real life, because that would be awful and horrible and extremely painful. Instead, you experience it in game. So although you can't feel it, you can't imagine what it would feel like, which honestly is also terrifying to do. This time when the Springlocks fail, it is as a result of your movement. You are the one who must wriggle to shake off the mini arenas, which are climbing up the suit and attempting to kinda climb into it with you. If this happens enough times, the mini arenas jump scare will get triggered, implying your death by mini arenas. However, if you also wriggle too much to keep them off you, without winding the Springlocks back up enough, you will trigger the Springlocks release, which will also result in your death by being impaled by suit parts which are released by those Springlocks. Yikes.
Halfway through into number 5, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Night series, Grim Chica is the primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awaken. Unlike the others though, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suits on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her face plates are very hard to spot. She is also almost entirely purple. The glowing accents inside her suit resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and overall her body is very slim like the original toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider, which is making me all sorts of confused. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. So yeah, not confused anymore. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, a victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother, tried spray on tan, still very pale. Why is this relatable to me? Why are these two, the two Springlock victims from Final Nights 3 so relatable? No matter what I'll do, I'm always gonna be pasty, and you know what, I'm okay with that. However, I did rank this above Grim Fredbear because it's Chica. And look at how they massacred my baby! Oh man, I'm sorry, mommy. These transgressions will not be accepted. In at 4, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurring antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear, and Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while someone is being killed outside. He's the predecessor to both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear, but Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts as a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they look slightly similar, the only similarities it really has to Freddy is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear, which I mean, I guess is the whole character. Am I Real's second form is the form that resembles Springtrap. This form has a green color, much like Springtrap does, and actually contains human remains. Great. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side, and there's a big hole that can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering, because you know, it has a corpse inside. His lower jaw is slanted and worn down. He doesn't have it's not circular like Cake Bear's. He has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso as well, revealing organs. He has rips and tears covering his arms, revealing more human remains, and he just appears to be missing like a finger on his right hand for whatever reason. And you know what? No matter what, it's still terrifying to look at. And of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus, okay? Because have you ever played Dormitibus? Have you seen these guys? They're terrifying. Just wait. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Reaper Spring Bonnie. Reaper Spring Bonnie, however, is the opposite of Stage Bonnie. This Reaper variant appears in Final Nights 3 and 4 and is an absolute monstrosity. But it's definitely more terrifying in Final Nights 4, so let's focus on that one. He is 100% the scariest animatronic in this series. In essence, Reaper Spring Bonnie is a nightmare Springtrap. He has sharp teeth and a very damaged and withered body. His suit is dark yellow in color. He sports a big purple bow tie on his upper chest, kinda like Glitch Trap. And then, like the other Reaper animatronics, Reaper Spring Bonnie has 1 pair of hollow, dark eyes that will steal your soul. I added that last part, but it's probably true. In Final Nights 4, his appearance is much more disfigured and gruesome, with sharper teeth, sharper claws, a different jaw, growths on his shoulders resembling fungi, and you know, a kind of a gooier appearance overall. It's like the slime girl from YouTube if she made a FNAF character. He's also missing half of his right ear like Springtrap in FNAF 3, and his suit is more greenish in color this time around to be more like Springtrap. And oh my god, this thing is still terrifying, and it's more terrifying than Springtrap, okay? This is what Springtrap should have been, or honestly, this is what I think like a Nightmare Springtrap would look like, okay? This is like a prototype Burn Trap in my eyes, or the way I'm thinking, like Melt Trap, the next iteration of Afton. But ultimately, in at number 2, Garvey, a psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, okay? Garvey is the penultimate antagonist in Dormitibus. As a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children and later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap. He was then burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire, unlike our William Afton, but that's not only where he differs, because Garvey is more gooey, and he's a more gooey or gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. And it's also actually not William Afton, since this game was released before the official name reveal, even before FNAF 4. So yeah, he's Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you end up wanting to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon monkey from hell that even Satan doesn't want around, okay? He's like trying to like send it away. He's like, yeah, no, don't. Like, you're seeing pictures, okay? Like, tell me, do you think that it shouldn't be on this list, okay? Because if you're saying that, you're lying. I can tell. And finally, in at number 1, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game. The fan game, which if I say the name will spoil it, so if you want to avoid spoilers, just go to the bloopers, but like, thanks for watching. But either way, I'll give you the chance to do that. Okay, there we go. That was your chance. You're done. A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznam on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018. And you know, since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear Fanverse, you know it's gonna be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving 5 nights and escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different set of tasks each night and must complete said tasks before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of this game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all. I don't know about you, some of you I do because I've seen the comments, but I would rather not get Springlocked. It's also revealed that you are William Afton in this game, but you know what, it's you, so it's good enough for me. In at 10, Robert Williams. Robert Williams was unfortunately the first human to be killed by a robot. Williams, who was an assembly line worker at Ford's plant in Flat Rock, Michigan, was killed on January 25th, 1979 when he was gathering spare parts at a storage facility at the plant, alongside a robotic arm that was lifting the heavier items. Williams was killed after the arm of the robot hit him as he climbed up to a shelf to retrieve some casts, and ironically, the robot was supposed to be the one retrieving the casts, but it kept giving wrong information regarding the number of casts left on that shelf, forcing Williams to have to climb up to count them. A jury determined that Williams' death was caused by lax safety measures, including one that should have caused the robot to make warning sounds when around a human, and the victim's family was awarded $10 million in damages. And a number of recommendations were made about improving safety standards when humans were working alongside robots, so that's something at least. And at 9, Kenji Arata. Kenji Arata was thought to be the second person killed by a robot, but the first Japanese man to be killed by one when he died at a Kawasaki Heavy Industries factory in Akashi, Japan in 1981. He was trying to repair the robot at the time of the accident until the robot pinned him against another machine and killed him. Attempts to free Arata from the robot's grip were unsuccessful. The robot had been taken offline for repairs and was separated from the other robots at the factory by a wire mesh fence, and it was supposed to remain shut down whenever anyone opened the door and entered the confines of the fence. Arata had, for some unknown reason, or at least a reason only known to himself, jumped over the fence into the area, therefore not activating the shutdown mechanism. His body rubbed against the machine and inadvertently switched it on, which caused it to come to life and pin him against another machine, which, yeah, yikes. In at 8, Junior Wheel Inc. At Junior Wheel Inc., a motor vehicle parts manufacturing company located in Norton, Ohio, an employee tragically lost their life in 2001 due to an accident involving a robot on the assembly line. As the employee was cleaning up their work area at the end of their shift, they accidentally entered an area of the assembly line where the robots had not yet been deactivated. The robot, mistaking the employee for a machine that needed to be assembled, grabbed them by the neck and suffocated them by pinning them under a wheel rim. While not exactly the same, the idea of being pinned by a robot and suffocating seems like how I'd picture dying from a Springlock failure. Most of this list isn't going to be exact one-for-ones, of course, since Springlocks don't exist in the real world as they do in the games, but suffocation would probably be one of the ways you'd suffer the most if you didn't die instantly from all the robot parts. The Springlock failures from the games being where the mechanism in the suits that holds back the robot parts enough for a human to use it as a costume break and allow the endoskeleton and whatnot to go back to where they'd be in animatronic mode. We haven't seen a true proper Springlock endo, so we can't really be sure about where the parts would go, but if they didn't end up replacing your bones or organs and killing you instantly, I think suffocation would be a main factor behind the death because, I mean, there's gotta be a lot around that area. And at 7, William Afton. I'm pretty sure that we all know this story by now, alright? Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down, he was on his way to immortality, and then once William discovered Remnant though, he started to spiral. He wanted to use it for fuel and to make his life truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lured the possessed animatronics to a back room that they couldn't access and dismantled them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly released the souls of the victims that he had claimed so long ago, and you know, they're ghost kids, so they scared him. He tried to scare them by fleeing into his spring Bonnie suit, which probably also made him feel more powerful, but his haste, coupled with the leaking in the room, because of course he didn't really care about the foundations of the place, causes the Springlock suit to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. Of course, because he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he went on to live that agonizing pain for 30 years, but you know what? He deserved it. And you can't say that this doesn't belong on the list, okay? As the only actual Springlock failure to be confirmed as game canon, some are probably going to consider this the only one that should have been on the list, but hey, I make the rules. And at 6, Dallas police. On July 7, 2016, Micah Johnson carried out an attack in Dallas that resulted in the deaths of 5 police officers and injured 9 more officers and 2 civilians. The attack took place during a protest, and Johnson initially targeted 3 officers, killing them and wounding 3 more officers and 1 civilian. He then fled to El Centro College, where he attacked another officer before barricading himself inside and attacking some more. A standoff ensued, during which the police tried to negotiate with him, who threatened to set off explosives. The police offered him a choice to surrender or face the possibility of being confronted with force, and Johnson did not surrender. Thus, the police ultimately, using a robot equipped with a brick of C4, to get inside and, let's say, deal with the event. It did damage the robot though, but this marked the first time a police department in the US actually used a bomb-laden robot for reasons other than disarming a bomb. Yeah.
Number 5. The fate of Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is thought by some, in regards to lore, to have been a possible Springlock victim. The consequences of this employee's Springlock failure would be, of course, that they died. That's right, people believe that Shadow Freddy, who appears to be somewhat ghostly in nature, is actually the spirit of a former Freddy's employee, who died while wearing a Springlock Freddy suit. It's believed that for one reason or another, the suit malfunctioned, murdering its wearer. As a result, Shadow Freddy was born to haunt its former workplace, and was also likely one of the reasons that Springlock suits stopped being used, at least temporarily. Although apparently not soon enough, as there were other failures that occurred possibly even after this one. Number 4. The fate of RWQFSFASXC. Some believe that not only is Shadow Freddy a victim of the Springlock's failing, but so is the shadowy figure of RWQFSFASXC. They believe that this shadowy Bonnie was another employee who, instead of being killed by the Springlock Freddy suit, met their end while inside the Springlock Bonnie suit, which also failed. My question is, if these employees happen to both die as a result of wearing and using the Springlock suits and the suits malfunctioning, did they die on the same day? Because if not, why would you ever continue to use these suits as a company? And why would you ever, as an employee, agree to get in another one? Unless one of them was hired after the other one and like no one told them about what happened to the last person to put on one of those suits. Still, legal liability right there. Like, my alarms are going off for like lawsuits. Of course, this was only a theory anyways, and actually one that Scott claimed was incorrect in regards to the true origins of both Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC. Number 3. Payback. Going back to the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the 1:35 a.m. book, Kelsey, wasn't the only one to get springlocked in the story. When Devin returns to the abandoned Freddy's to see if Kelsey might still be alive, he notices the suit is empty. He thinks he sees something further inside, and so he decides to reach into the mouth of the suit, only for the suit to seemingly clamp down on his arm. Of course, you should never do that. If you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I'll put my arm in this thing where my arm could get stuck, don't do it. The more he struggles, the more he seems to get sucked into the suit. Sure, this isn't so much a Springlock failure from the inside, and no one's wearing the suit in some of these. It's more reminiscent of the Bite of 83, because I don't think there was anyone in that suit. But this is still a Springlock suit failing. So, while different, I still consider it to be a failure with consequences. Consequences being, Devin also likely died. Number 2. The Bite of 83. Definitely among the most memorable Springlock failures is the Bite of 83. Now some of you are gonna say, Amanda, this is not a Springlock failure, there was no one in that suit that we know of, which sure. But still, it's a Springlock suit and it failed, so I'm counting it. Anyways, I feel like the Bite of 83 hasn't been fully confirmed really at all, but many theorize it to be true. Many theorize that our theory is true, that we have so far, because this is all we got, alright? We grab all these little Easter eggs and then we do our best to try to figure out what's going on in the narrative. Now, why do we believe that this could even be a Springlock failure? Well, one, the crying child was crying when he was held up to give Fredbear a kiss, which many theorize is the reason the jaws of the animatronic bear clamped down, as a result of the tears making the gears wet and causing a Springlock malfunction. Two, we have been led to believe that Fredbear was a Springlock suit, so that's also why people suspect that the Bite of 83 could also be a Springlock malfunction. Number 1. Multiple. While Shadow Freddy and RWQFS FASXC may have been debunked as Springlock failure victims by Scott himself, this theory didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, many thought that they were among those generally referred to in FNAF 3 during Phone Guy's recording for night number 4. Here, Phone Guy mentions that the Springlock suits are being discontinued as a result of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures. Which, I gotta say, it makes sense to me too, because I'm like, what were all these multiple Springlock failures, what does that entail, and how many were there? Oh boy.
In a 10 unnamed man. In 2015, there was a tragic incident at a Volkswagen plant in Germany in which a man was killed by a robot. The victim was part of a team that was setting up the robot, which was responsible for picking up components and assembling them into car parts. The robot was normally kept in a cage, and it was while the man was working on it inside the cage, and that's when the incident occurred. According to reports, the robot grabbed the man and pinned him against some metal sheets, causing serious injuries. The man later died as a result of those injuries. In a statement, Volkswagen said that they believed the incident was caused by human error, and it's worth noting that another worker who was inside the cage with the victim at the time was not harmed, but they weren't really sure. Or at least, of course, they're gonna say it was human error. And at 9, Wanda Holbrook. In March 2015, a robot at the Ventura Iona Mains plant in Michigan caused the death of Wanda Holbrook, a 57-year-old maintenance specialist who worked at the plant. The plant, which produced car parts, was divided into sections, with robots from one section supposedly unable to enter another. However, one robot did cross into a section where Wanda was working and picked up a trailer part, which it then dropped on her head, killing her instantly. The robot was attempting to load the trailer part onto a fixture that had already contained another trailer part, which should have been impossible, due to the fact that a fixture can only hold one trailer part at any given time. Wanda's husband William filed charges against the 5 companies involved in the production of the robot, and I'm pretty sure he won. But skull crushing, come on, that's too close. In at 8, Oerlikon. In 2007, 9 South African soldiers were killed and 14 were injured when an anti-aircraft weapon, the Oerlikon GDF-005, malfunctioned during a training exercise at the Army's Combat Training Center in Northern Cape. The weapon, which is capable of firing, targeting, and engaging hostiles without human intervention, and can even reload automatically, jammed and exploded before firing 250 rounds of high explosive 33mm rounds from its 2 barrels at the soldiers. It's believed that the accident may have been caused by either a software or mechanical failure, and according to Richard Young, CEO of a defense company, this type of malfunction is not uncommon, and he's witnessed similar incidents with automatic anti-aircraft weapons in the past. But fortunately, no one was killed in those instances. But if that's an issue, and not an uncommon one, maybe you should fix it. And at 7, the Alvy machine. While working at a meatpacking plant in Greeley, Colorado, a construction worker met a tragic end while installing an access catwalk. One of the large machines at the plant, the Alvy, which was used to move boxed meat from a higher conveyor belt to a lower one, had not been properly turned off while the contractor was working. The heavy arm of the robot knocked him off his feet, and he then fell 10 feet onto a conveyor belt below, where his head was crushed by heavy machinery, him instantly, yet again with the head crushing. Jeez. Or as the accident report so eloquently puts it, quote, "The Alvy machine was not de-energized nor locked out, and employee number 1 wore no fall protection. While employee number 1 was connecting the platform to the catwalk adjacent to, in, and around the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car of the Alvy machine, the car struck the construction worker. Employee number 1 fell approximately 10 feet, getting caught in the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car, and traveling under the car, which crushed employee employee number 1's head and killed him as the car reached its first resistance, that being the next angle iron joint of the car pathway. End quote. Gotta love the numbers. Jeez. And its 6th mystery incident. Alright, so this one's actually FNAF. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This one comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures. Some interpreted this as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or multiple suits failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suit, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the 2 animatronics that have Springlock versions. However, there are multiple holes to this theory. Mostly the design of the shadow animatronics is not like the Springlock suits. Shadow Bonnie is very much modeled after Toy Bonnie, and Freddy is more like the Freddy or Golden Freddy from FNAF 1 and not like the Fredbear we see in FNAF 4. There are also people that say if this happened, then the robots would have been decommissioned, but as we've seen from this list and the last part, that wouldn't necessarily happen. And also, if you like what we're doing here, then firstly, seek help, but also, be sure you hit like and subscribe, because I yell about various video game series all the time, and yes, it is various ones now, we're not just doing FNAF, I promise. Halfway through at number 5, Crying Child. Okay, now this one is certainly going to get at least a little controversial, but there is no way that I could do this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates of my Instagram DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram not asking about literally anything else aside from the bite of 83 and how it had to have been the Springlocks kind of bothers me, and it does so to my core, okay? I say it every time that I brought it up, but it couldn't have been a Springlock failure. That being said though, if it is possible, that's kind of what this list is talking about, mysteries, who knows? The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning that no Springlocks would have had the chance to fail, since keeping in mind a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanisms used to move the robotic parts failing, meaning that all the actual like endoskeleton bits snap back into where they should have been, and that's why if someone's inside, that's a bad thing, you know, because you don't want to really be sharing your bone bits with metal bits, and there also would have been no Springlock mechanisms inside the mouth because there's no robotic bits between the jaws. But again, that's the whole thing. The jaw just moves up and down. But still, it's a possibility since logic and physics doesn't really seem to apply to the FNAF world, which is made evident by those goddamn doors from FNAF 1. Even if they're supposed to be electromagnets, that they would only open with power, I'm just saying, okay? Maybe Scott intended it to be a Springlock failure, but he just showed it in literally the worst way possible. I don't know. In at 4, the Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that was, is actually a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no real harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure would definitely provide enough power to do that, since, you know, the Springlocks themselves would snap with a ferocious velocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to actually crush a skull thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics ended up getting suspended, because now one of their own employees was bit and then they had to promote him and then fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So yeah, was the Bite of 87 a Springlock failure? Maybe. And was it the moment that caused the Springlock suits to be retired? I don't know. Okay, it also could have been the FNAF 4 bite. But considering the FNAF 3 phone calls, it actually seems to be this bite though, since in FNAF 2 we hear about someone using one of the yellow suits and not mentioning the Springlocks until FNAF 3, meaning that they were probably still in use normally come 1985, and Crying Child died in 1983, so it was probably the Bite of 87 that got them suspended, so there you go. Getting close to the end, at number 3, Golden Fredbear. One theory I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure was mostly the start of FNAF 4 theory, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't actually move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child Child was the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true based on the characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night and not just coloring and size, since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have been, since, you know, Fredbear would have to accommodate a human and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since he would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter, since Springtrap went to Scrap Trap and then to Burn Trap, so honestly, it's all up in the air. However, I have yet to see proper substantial evidence of this being the case, and I don't think that they would have removed the endoskeleton before that. But ultimately, into number 2, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow Animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and this comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is being used to describe the suit as a whole and not the actual individual mechanisms that make up the suit. So, the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside the suit failing at the same time, or just multiple suits failing. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suit, which is where the Shadow Animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these are both shadows of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. I mean, there are some holes in this theory, because, you know, one of them looks like Toy Bonnie, and Toy Bonnie's not a Springlock suit, but there is potential that this is the case, because again, designs, consistency doesn't really seem to matter anymore. And finally, into number 1, Double Trouble. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Springlock Bonnie suit that we see in FNAF 3? It is possible, okay, and it certainly appears like this could be the case in the FNAF novels. Well, it is the case in the FNAF novels, but because of that, it could be the case in the games. Since William in the books is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before actually becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason that the Springlock suits were actually retired? Since we do hear of the unfortunate incident at a sister location, so is that unfortunate incident instead William? There are plenty of people that it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, because, you know, he's kind of up there, and I mean, he doesn't really seem to care about anyone else, so if they failed on them, why would he retire them? But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on after, you know, when like the room was wet in FNAF 3, this could be unlikely unless he just doesn't have the capacity for trauma, but it's still possible either way, okay? So since this list is about mysteries, I feel like this deserves to be on it. And you know what? Be the capstone. In a 10-second times the charm. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Spring Bonnie suit like we see happen in FNAF 3? In a way, it's possible, and it appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described as having scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired in the first place, since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location? So is that unfortunate incident actually William? There are plenty of other people that it could be as well, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But with William continuing to use the suits afterwards and putting it on like we hear in FNAF 3, and then again he ends up failing in FNAF 3 as well, it's unlikely, so no. In a 9, Golden Fredbear. One theory that I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure mostly started around FNAF 4, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp and lifeless in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't physically move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child would be the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true, based on characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night, although I guess that might not mean much, and just like coloring and size. Since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have to be, since Fredbear would have to accommodate a human plus the robot parts, and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since, you know, Golden Freddy would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter much, apparently, since Springtrap went to Scrap Trap and then went to Burn Trap. But from the evidence, it seems like Golden Freddy is merely an illusion or a hallucination created in the mind of Michael Afton. See our Golden Freddy was never real video for more info on that, because that proves this idea wrong. And you're all gonna be mad at me, but you know what? That video deserves more love, or at least interaction. In at 8, Elizabeth Afton. I've seen a few people asking if or assuming that Elizabeth Afton was a victim of a Springlock failure. And the truth is, She wasn't. The circus baby animatronic isn't a Springlock suit, since a Springlock suit in this case is defined as a suit that contains robotic parts, but uses a special mechanism that when cranked moves those robotic parts to the side so that a person can climb inside and wear the robot like a suit. The baby animatronic isn't one of those, because there's no way to actually wear this animatronic. Baby it's just a robot, so there is no way that she could have Springlocked Elizabeth. Elizabeth is just a normal victim of her father's killing spree, which resulted in her somehow wanting to make him proud, despite him being the reason she's dead. Directly. Like, not even an, he just because he made the animatronic thing. No. Nobody else had a hand in her death aside from him. But she still wants to make him proud. I don't know, I guess baby crushed her body and then her sanity too. Which, I mean, I'd understand. That's pretty rough. And it's 7, Kelsey. The New Kid from 1:35 a.m. is a story from 3rd Fazbear Frights book. The story revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts. They aren't really popular, you know, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they try to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time Devin grows jealous of Kelsey, because, you know, he's adored and loved by everyone in the school. So, in an act of revenge, or to maybe try to gain control over him, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. I guess to try to humble him, I guess? I don't know why you thought that this would be a good thing, but obviously the plan goes horribly wrong because it's a FNAF book. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks ended up failing, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, causing all of the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth because he doesn't think about fingerprints, and snap. The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out. But not before seeing a body in the suit, with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. I don't know, okay? Could this be a character that we have yet to see in the games? Probably not. It's just a character in the book, alright? This doesn't happen in the games, okay? It's a myth. This is just a book thing, okay? Stop. And it's 6, unintentional. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions by William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that is not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made. And considering the abilities of Baby, at the very least, we know that these were made in order to kill. We know that was a thought in his brain, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to think that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. More on one of them in a minute, but honestly, if William made the Funtimes with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks. And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal bars, cogs, gears, and more into the same place your body would take up, was made with pure intentions, then you need therapy more than I do, okay? I have some numbers you can call. Especially when a normal animatronic and then a suit for your employees would be cheaper and less likely the focus of a lawsuit. Speaking of which, halfway through into number 5, Joshua Brown. Joshua Brown was the first person to be killed in a self-driving car accident. On May 7th of 2016, while driving a Tesla Model S through Williston, Florida, the car was unable to distinguish between an 18-wheel tractor trailer and the bright sky. As a result, the Tesla collided with the trailer, tearing off the roof of the car, and then crashed through 2 fences and a pole before coming to a stop. Tesla initially tried to deflect responsibility for the accident, pointing out that this was the first accident involving the Model S in 130 million miles of driving, which was below the industry average of 94 million miles, but Tesla also emphasized that the autopilot system was not perfect and required drivers to keep their hands on the steering wheel. However, investigations by the National Transport Safety Board revealed that Brown had his hands on the steering wheel for only 25 seconds out of the 37-minute trip, and neither he nor the autopilot applied the brakes. The airbags did not deploy until after the car had left the road and hit some trees, which I think is absolutely terrifying as well, but considering that the police found a micro SD card containing a Harry Potter movie at the accident scene, the driver of the truck claiming that Brown was watching a Harry Potter movie at the time of the accident, and 2 laptops being found in the car. This seems like more user error than a fault of the vehicle. And at 4, Devin. The story The New Kid from 1:35 a.m., the third Fazbear Frights book, revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts from their class, and they aren't really popular, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrived at their school, they tried to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time, Devin ends up growing jealous because of that, since Kelsey has everything he wants. So, in an act of revenge or in an attempt to gain control, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's and trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. To try to humble him, I guess? I don't know. Why do you know what a Springlock suit does? Do you just chill in it for an hour or 2? I don't know. Why do you know about this? Either way, the plan goes horribly wrong, and after getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, and it causes the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic, pull on the ground, all the grisly scenes that you'd expect from this. Devin and Mick then leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So, a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth and snap! Haha, the Springlocks fail again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing that the body in the suit had black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. That's the only other Springlock failure that we actually know happened, so yeah, I'm putting it on the list. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Lenco Inc. Lenco Inc. is a company which makes the plastic products for a number of industries, including the clear plastic cases used in the packaging of CDs. CDs are those they're like Blu-ray discs that you would get your dad for Christmas, but for music and not as durable. And the case is the stuff that people were cutting up to make hologram projectors out of with their phones. You just place it on the screen. Yeah. Unfortunately though, one of the robotic arms used in this manufacturing process killed an employee at the factory back in 2007. According to accident investigators, the arm of the robot malfunctioned and moved unexpectedly, striking a male worker in the head and ribs, causing severe blunt force trauma. It was reported that the employee survived for 2 weeks in the local hospital, but eventually succumbed to the serious injuries. My brain to draw crazy parallels between that and Crying Child from FNAF 4, who had severe head trauma and died of his injuries in the hospital later on, which sends a chill down my spine, because that's yikes. But ultimately, in at number 2, Ramji Lal. In 2015, a robot at the SKH Metals factory in Manesia, India, caused the death of a 24-year-old Ramji Lal, an employee at the factory. The robot, which was used to lift and weld metal parts together, accidentally stabbed Lal in the abdomen while he was attempting to adjust a mispositioned metal sheet. Lal was taken to the hospital after the accident, but he later died from internal bleeding caused by the crushed ribs and abdomen. Despite initial reports suggesting that Lal may have also been electrocuted, an autopsy found no evidence of this and was ultimately determined that he died from the injuries sustained in the accident with the robot. However, the police reportedly stood by the death by electrocution, which is odd, and is way too close to the cops from FNAF, ignoring just the animatronics being compared to human corpses, it wasn't a thing. I don't know why they were doing that, but again, it's obviously not the same thing, but definitely some interesting parallels that at least my brain can see. You probably can't, but you know what, I'm weird. And finally, and at number 1, Anna Maria Vital. In 2009, a malfunctioning robot at Golden State Foods in Los Angeles resulted in the death of Anna Maria Vital, a 41-year-old employee at the company. Golden State Foods was a major supplier for McDonald's, reported that Vital had been attempting to remove a box that was stuck in the machinery on the factory floor when the accident occurred. After freeing the box, the robot grabbed her, causing severe crushing injuries. Despite efforts by her colleagues to free her, Vital's injuries were too severe, and she passed away a few moments later. Given that this was a death at the hands of a robot, crushing someone, being grabbed by an animatronic, and related to a fast food chain, this was extremely, frighteningly similar, at least in my brain, to the stories that we see coming from the FNAF games, especially in regards to Elizabeth Afton, who gets grabbed and crushed by Baby at Circus Baby's Pizza World, which is basically FNAF's McDonald's. In at 10, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now, okay? Everything was going well at first, they couldn't pin him down, and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make him truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lures the possessed animatronics to a back room that they can't normally access, and then uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims that he claimed so long ago. And seeing these victims causes William to panic. Understandably, I mean, they're freaking ghost kids and they're also the ghosts of kids that you killed. So, yeah, then this absolute animatronic genius, the technician that has made the suits, handles the suit maintenance, and explained to every employee the proper procedure for putting these Springlock suits on, climbs into the Spring Bonnie suit that he actually uses to kill, and then climbs inside in such a panic that he actually didn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling, and, you know, literally everything else, probably also his sweat, which caused the Springlocks that were active in this moment, since it was in suit mode, to fail. And I feel like that moment is one of the most confusing mysteries. Why did he do that? He knows better. If he can avoid the cops for that long, why did he think that this was all just gonna be fine? Dude. In and on Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Okay, her name was hidden for years, only being revealed in the survival logbook and then confirmed in the FNAF movie script Scott talked about in a post on Reddit. That script though was ultimately scrapped. And honestly, we don't really know much about her. We don't know how she died, and there are plenty of theories that claim to have evidence of her being a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that would be an easier way than just, I don't know, a knife. I mean, after all, she does possess Golden Freddy, and some figure that he could be a Springlock suit that had the guts removed, hence the slumped over nature in his FNAF 1 and 2 forms. However, if this was the case, and Cassidy's body was in that suit, wouldn't they have found it when they were gutting the animatronic? But maybe, then again, William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. For a suit technician though, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics he literally designed, since he got in the suit when it was wet like we just talked about. But either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim could be true, but it's still a mystery. At least until Scott acknowledges the idea. Until then, it's just a theory, so don't go around saying that it's fact. It's a mystery. We don't know. In at 8, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Frights story The New Kid from the 3rd Fazbear Frights book 135 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up becoming friends with the main protagonist, Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey though, so he hatches a plan with his other friend to trap Kelsey in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. I mean, if you're going to trap him in a Springlock suit, I mean, isn't that isn't that how you would have trapped him normally? I didn't think you really thought that plan through. But at least they thought it killed him, since a week later Devin returns to make sure that Kelsey is still in there, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color is different. And then Devin gets stuck inside the suit because he reached his arm in and then he bleeds out. Only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. It is definitely an interesting story because while Kelsey did get Springlock, he ended up being fine. So what really happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, some think that he's supposed to be the one you should not have killed, but no matter what, we all feel like there's a high possibility that Kelsey was a Springlock victim, or should have been, but we don't know how and we don't know when, but I mean it's still a definite possibility, which makes it a mystery. Not really an impactful one though, so in at 8 it goes. In at 7, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before the Silver Eye starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve a Springlock failure or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, finally actually, you know, took care of his worst enemy, or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms that's inside of her that she used to kill Henry. I mean, hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time, or maybe the right suit at the right time for him. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, I mean, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately. I mean, it's true, it doesn't. Henry dying doesn't really mean much overall for the FNAF lore, okay? We didn't even know that he was alive until FNAF 6, for God's sakes. So maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way rather than just burning him alive. And at 6, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all time, okay? We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sounds of multiple animatronics banging at his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know that he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories is that the animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of events for the Springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have the exact years for the things getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one, or maybe he tried to use it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just doesn't want us to know that yet or something, and what we hear could just be the FNAF 3 cutscene. I mean, I doubt it, but it would be absolutely hilarious if he ended up pulling that on us, okay? And for all those saying that Phone Guy can't be Afton because Afton is British or whatever, so is Tom Holland, okay? It's called acting. You can fake an accent, especially if you're a serial killer who's trying to evade everything, you know? Kinda, yeah, it's a thing. Halfway through into number 5, William Afton. Again. I say again, even though technically William was on the last list, and some may consider this the same thing, but I mean, in the context of a part 2, it makes sense to say again. But anyway, could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the spring bodysuit like we see in FNAF 3? It actually is possible, which explains why I say again. And it certainly appears like it could be the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired? Could he have been the victim of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, since we hear of the unfortunate incident at the sister location? Could it have been William? There are plenty of people that it could have been, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time at least. But with William continuing to put the suit on afterwards, when the room was wet like we see in FNAF 3's cutscene, it suggests that this theory is unlikely, but it's still possible. William is a pretty dumb guy. I've said that a lot. In at 4, Volkswagen. A contractor at another Volkswagen production plant in Germany also died as a result of an incident involving a robot, according to the automaker. The incident occurred on a Monday at the plant in Bonneville, located 100 kilometers north of Frankfurt. The victim, a 22-year-old man, was part of a team that was setting up a stationary robot, and it grabbed and crushed him against a metal plate. According to Volkswagen spokesperson Heiko Hillwing, initial conclusions indicated that it was a human error that caused the incident, again, rather than a problem with the robot itself. But the robot, which can be programmed to perform various tasks in the assembly process, normally operates within a confined area at the plant, handling auto parts and manipulating them as well. Other people were there, but they weren't injured, so again, it's all up in the air. Getting close to the end of number 3, Sodesia Sterling Heights. On December 15th, 2012, an employee at Sodesia Sterling Heights, a US company that manufactures car parts, was while working inside a robot work cell. The 38-year-old male employee was inside the cell when the gates closed, and he was struck from behind by a transfer robot, which crushed his chest and back. The company, which specializes in producing heavier car parts such as chassis components, used powerful robot arms to lift and maneuver these parts around the plant. In this incident, the machine should have been powered down, but it moved unexpectedly and pinned the worker against the wire of the cage, causing the fatal injuries, which is unfortunate and really makes me question why we use robots at all. But ultimately, in number 2, robot surgeons. Robot-assisted surgery is a form of minimally invasive surgery that allows surgeons to perform complex procedures through small incisions or remotely using a computer console. I had one of these used on me when I was getting my appendix out. These robots have been hailed as a major advancement in 21st century medicine because they offer increased precision and control for the surgeon, which can lead to improved patient outcomes. However, it is important to note that like any medical procedure, robot-assisted surgery carries some risks. A study in the United States found that surgical robots may be linked to the deaths of 144 people between 2008 and 2013. The causes of these deaths varied, but included system errors that caused delays in the procedure and instances of machinery falling into patients' open wounds. Despite these risks, robot-assisted surgery is still widely used in the medical field because it offers many potential benefits to both patients and surgeons. For example, it can allow for less trauma to the patient during the surgery, faster recovery times, and less scarring. But overall, the use of surgical robots in the medical field is a complex issue that requires careful consideration for both the surgeon and the patient for, risks and benefits, and either way, it's up to you. And finally, in at number 1, Regina Elsa. In June 2016, 20-year-old Regina Elsa was killed in a robot-related accident just 2 weeks before her wedding. The incident occurred at Asian USA, a South Korean-owned plant in Cusseta, Alabama that produced parts for Hyundai and Kia vehicles. On the day of the accident, Elsa and some co-workers were attempting to repair a faulty robot despite the fact that they weren't supposed to do so. They had tried to reach the maintenance department, but no one answered their calls, so they decided to fix the robot themselves, probably out of fear that they would get in trouble if the robot wasn't working. Unfortunately, the robot suddenly restarted and pushed Elsa against another machine, causing serious injuries. She was taken to the East Alabama Medical Center and airlifted to UAB Hospital, but she died the following morning. An investigation into the incident revealed that Agent USA had committed several safety violations in order to maximize profits, and in fact, the US Department of Labor had fined the company and two staffing agencies $2.7 million for 27 safety violations just 2 weeks before this incident. The inquiry also found that Agent USA overworked its employees and encouraged them to repair the faulty machines, which explains why they were doing it.